What if the calmest person in the room is the most furious one? What if the one who smiles at everyone, who absorbs everything, who never raises their voice, is already burning inside? Either they know it or they don't. If you're a deep intuitive, you know exactly what I mean. That feeling. Someone says something dismissive, something careless, and on the outside, you barely react. Maybe you nod, maybe you smile, maybe you change the subject like nothing happened. But inside, something just caught fire. And here's what makes it worse. You won't call it what it is. You'll call it frustration. You'll call it disappointment. You'll call it being tired. You'll call it anything at all. But what it actually is, rage. If you're an INFJ, INTJ, INFP, or INTP, this video is going to show you something you've been hiding, not only from others, but maybe also from yourself. And by the end, you'll understand not just why you do it, but what that hidden rage is actually trying to tell you. And you'll know if your mind has been using the wall strategy or the fog strategy to deal with it. Trust me, that difference will change how you understand everything you've been carrying. First, though, we need to talk about how this calm became so convincing in the first place. The French have a word for it, faux calme. It simply means false calm. And for deep intuitives, it isn't just something you do in difficult moments. It's your default operating mode. You learned it early, maybe as a child who felt too much in a family that didn't want to deal with depth. Maybe as a teenager who realized that showing your real reactions made people uncomfortable. So you built this exterior, and you got so good at it that people started to believe it. Your coworkers believe it. Your friends believe it. Even your family believes it. But here's the part that changes everything. At some point, you started believing it too. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social mask we all wear. But for deep intuitives, the persona doesn't just sit on top of the real self. Over time, it fuses with it. You don't just wear the mask of calm. You become the mask. And the real emotions, the raw, unfiltered intensity underneath, they don't disappear. They go underground. Now, if you're watching this and feeling something stir in your chest right now, drop a comment below. Just one word, even just rage. Because I promise you, you are not the only one feeling this. So, the emotions go underground. But here's the question that matters. Of all the emotions you could bury, why is rage the one that goes deepest? Why is that the one you can't face? Here's what most people don't understand about deep intuitives. You are not calm people who occasionally get upset. You are deeply intense people who have learned to perform calm so convincingly that the world treats you as though you have no needs, no limits, and no breaking point. And when the world treats you that way long enough, rage begins to build, but it builds silently. Think about it. How many times has someone crossed a boundary you never voiced? How many times have you absorbed someone else's emotional chaos and pretended it didn't cost you anything? How many times have you been the one everyone leans on? But when you needed support, the room was empty. Each one of those moments leaves a residue. And that residue is not sadness, it's not exhaustion, it's rage. The rage of being unseen, the rage of being taken for granted, the rage of carrying a depth that the world doesn't even know is there. But here's why deep intuitives can't access it. Because rage contradicts the self-image. INFJs see themselves as compassionate healers. INFPs see themselves as gentle souls, guided by values. INTJs see themselves as rational strategists above emotional reactions. INTPs see themselves as detached thinkers who don't get caught up in feelings. Rage doesn't fit any of those identities, so it gets exiled into what Jung called the shadow, the part of yourself you refuse to see. And here's what nobody talks about. Not all of you exile it the same way. The faux calm looks the same from the outside for all four types. But what's happening behind that mask is radically different depending on who you are. And for half of you watching this, what I'm about to say next is going to be deeply uncomfortable. Here's the hidden layer. If you're an INFJ or an INTJ, your faux calm works like a wall. You feel the rage. You know it's there. You can sense it building, pressing against the inside of your chest, but you choose, consciously, to contain it. The INFJ contains it through emotional management. You organize the emotional field around you. You prioritize harmony. You absorb the tension so nobody else has to feel it. The INTJ contains it through strategy. You convert the fire into cold analysis, into calculated distance, into moves that look rational but are fueled by something that burns. This is what psychology calls suppression. It's a relatively mature defense mechanism. You feel the emotion, you recognize it, but you actively hold it down. You are standing guard at the door. You know what's behind it. You just won't let it out. But if you're an INFP or an INTP, something completely different is happening. And this is the part that might shock you. Your faux calm is not a wall. It's a fog. You're not standing guard at any door. There is no door. The rage never even reaches the level of conscious awareness. It gets intercepted before you can feel it. For INFPs, it works like this. Something happens that should make you angry, but before the anger fully forms, your mind starts reframing. Maybe they didn't mean it that way. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe if I look at it from their perspective. Your auxiliary extroverted intuition offers you escape route after escape route, and each one leads you further from the emotion that was trying to surface. You don't suppress the rage. You genuinely don't catch it. It passes through you like a signal you never tuned into. For INTPs, it's even more invisible. The emotion gets rerouted into analysis before it ever registers as a feeling. You don't feel angry. You feel like you've identified a logical inconsistency. You don't feel hurt. You've simply noticed that someone's reasoning is flawed. The entire emotional experience gets translated into intellectual observation. And you're so good at this that you will genuinely, sincerely tell someone, "I'm not angry," and believe it completely. Because by the time you're speaking, the rage has already been converted into something your mind can process. The feeling itself, gone, dissolved into thought before you ever knew it was there. So here's what this means. Half of you watching this right now are thinking, yes, I know my rage, I just can't let it out. And the other half are thinking, I don't think I really have rage. And if you're in that second group, that's exactly what the fog does. That's exactly how it works. Now, the price the first half pays is easy to understand. That tension inside is exhausting. It wears you down, day after day. You know it's there. You feel the weight. And that's painful, but at least the pain is visible to you. But the second half, your situation is actually more dangerous because you're paying a price you can't even see. When you can't feel your own anger, you lose access to your own limits. You don't know when to leave. You don't know when to say no. You stay too long in jobs that drain you, in friendships that take from you, in relationships where you give everything and receive almost nothing. And you can't explain why, because the emotion that was supposed to protect you, the one that was supposed to tell you, this is enough, never reached the surface. And because you never push back, because you never react, you become the perfect target for people who need exactly that. People who take without asking. People who cross lines you didn't even know you had. The ones who sense that you won't fight back, not because you're weak, but because you genuinely don't know there's something to fight about. And the worst part, you've turned that into a virtue. You tell yourself you're the calm one, the understanding one, the one who doesn't overreact. And it feels like wisdom. It's not. It's the fog's most convincing disguise. Because real calm has boundaries. Yours doesn't. And what your mind refuses to feel, your body carries instead. The chronic fatigue, the tension that never goes away, the heaviness that no amount of sleep seems to fix. And it doesn't stop at the body. You start losing trust in yourself. You become indecisive, not because you lack intelligence, but because the signal that's supposed to tell you what matters, what you actually want, what you're willing to fight for, has been muted. Your confidence erodes, slowly, quietly, and you can't trace it to anything specific because there's no single event to point to. Just a slow fading. That's not burnout. That's not a personality flaw. That's rage with nowhere to go. I know this is heavy. Stay with me, because understanding the pattern is the first step to breaking it, and we're not done yet. If you want to go deeper on this, on how these unconscious defense mechanisms actually shape your relationships and decisions in ways you can't see, I write about this every week on my Substack newsletter, The Hidden Chamber. The link is in the description. It's free, and it's built specifically for minds like yours. Now, whether you're behind the wall or lost in the fog, the rage doesn't just sit there quietly. Energy doesn't vanish. It transforms. And where it goes will surprise you. Deep intuitives don't explode. They implode. And the implosion looks different depending on whether you're a wall type or a fog type. For the wall types, the implosion is dramatic but delayed. INFJs implode through the door slam. You absorb and absorb and absorb, knowing the whole time that rage is building. And then one day, with no warning that anyone else can see, you cut someone off completely. People around you are shocked, but you're not. You saw this coming for months. You just hoped the wall would hold forever. It never does. INTJs implode through cold severance. You don't lash out. You don't even argue. You simply lose respect. And once respect is gone, you become surgically efficient at removing that person or situation from your life. No emotion visible, but the rage was the engine behind every calculated move. You knew exactly what you were doing. You just told yourself it was logic. But for the fog types, the implosion is invisible, even to you. INFPs implode inward. The rage folds back on itself and becomes self-attack. Instead of being angry at the person who hurt you, you become angry at yourself for caring too much, for being too sensitive, for not being stronger. But here's the devastating part. You don't even recognize this as redirected rage. You think it's just who you are. You think the self-criticism is accurate. It's not. It's your unfelt rage, with nowhere else to go, turning you into its only target. INTPs implode into obsessive analysis. You don't feel angry. You build a perfect, airtight, logical case for why someone is wrong, why a system is broken, why an institution has failed. You can spend days dismantling something intellectually and never once connect it to an emotional wound. But the intensity of that analysis, the relentless need to take something apart, that's the rage. That's where it went. You just can't see it because it's wearing the disguise your mind trusts most. It's wearing logic. And for both fog types, long before the implosion hits, the rage leaks out as something you barely notice. A frustration that never lifts. A quiet irritation that shows up at moments you can't explain, toward people or situations that shouldn't bother you as much as they do. You call it a mood. You call it your personality. It's not. It's rage leaking through the only cracks it can find. Jung himself said it. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. For fog types, that line isn't philosophy, it's a diagnosis. Now take a breath. I know that was a lot to sit with, but I needed you to see it clearly before I asked you this. Which of these patterns do you recognize in yourself? And here's the real question. Are you behind the wall, or are you lost in the fog? Type wall or fog in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to see how this splits. And if this is opening something up for you, make sure you hit subscribe. I make content like this every week for deep intuitives, for the ones who think differently, the ones who feel differently, the ones who are tired of surface-level personality content that never gets to the real thing. But recognizing the pattern isn't enough. The real question is, what do you do with this once you finally see it? And this is where the path splits in two. You've probably heard the advice before. Express your anger, set boundaries, speak up. And that advice is real. It matters. But for deep intuitives, it's only the outer layer. It's where the work begins, not where it ends. Because you can learn to set a boundary and still not know why you needed one. You can learn to speak up and still not hear what your own silence was trying to tell you. Without going deeper, these measures stay on the surface. And you, of all people, were never built for the surface. But before we go there, I need you to hear something first. This rage is not a personality flaw. It never was. It's a signal that a boundary was crossed, a signal that a need was ignored, a signal that something in your life needs to change. The question was never how to get rid of it. The question is how to finally listen to it. So what does deeper actually look like? That depends on which side of the split you're on. If you're a wall type, an INFJ or INTJ, your work is to stop controlling. The rage is already in the room with you. You've been staring at it for years. You've just been holding the door shut with everything you have, terrified of what happens if you let it speak. Your path is not about discovering the rage. It's about trusting that you can feel it fully without it destroying you or the people around you. You need to learn that your anger doesn't make you dangerous. It makes you honest. But if you're a fog type, an INFP or INTP, your work is completely different. And honestly, it's harder because you can't integrate what you can't see. Your path is not about letting the rage out. It's about finding it in the first place. It means learning to catch those moments when your mind reflexively reframes the emotion or converts it into thought. It means pausing before the escape route appears and asking, wait, what was I actually feeling before I started analyzing? Two different paths, but they lead to the same place. This is what Jung called shadow work. Going back to meet the parts of yourself you exiled, the rage you couldn't afford to feel, the intensity you learned to hide, the needs you convinced yourself you didn't have. And when you finally face them, when you stop running from the wall or drifting through the fog, something begins that Jung called individuation. The process of becoming who you actually are, not who the world needed you to be. And for deep intuitives, it almost always begins here, with the rage you swore wasn't there. Whether you were guarding it behind a wall, or whether it was dissolving into fog before you ever knew its name, the work is the same destination reached by two different roads. You meet the rage, you let it speak, and you discover that it was never your enemy. It was the part of you that refused to be erased. When you finally stop performing calm and start listening to what's underneath, something remarkable happens. You don't become an angry person. You become a whole person. A person who can feel the full range of their own depth without flinching. A person whose calm, when it appears, is real. Not faux calm, real calm. The calm that comes after you've faced what was hiding underneath. So here's my invitation to you. The next time you feel that familiar faux calm settle over you, pause. Don't perform it. Don't let the mask do its work automatically. If you're a wall type, try opening the door, just a crack. See what's behind it. And if you're a fog type, try standing still. Don't reframe. Don't analyze. Just stand in the feeling before your mind carries you away from it. And if the honest answer is rage, don't run from it. Sit with it. It's been waiting for you. Some of you, it's been waiting behind the wall. And some of you, It's been waiting in the fog, hoping you'd finally stop long enough to notice it was there. If this resonated, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to support this channel and help me keep making this kind of content, you can join the membership. The join button is right under this video. Members get early access to selected videos before anyone else. And before I leave you, I want you to remember one thing. The rage was never the problem. The rage was always the signal. It was the part of you that knew, long before your mind caught up, that something needed to change. The only mistake was not listening. Don't make that mistake again.